We defeated ISIS in record time. It was supposed to take years, and we did it in a matter of weeks. These are great generals. These are tough guys. These are not woke guys. But their favorite general in terms of genius was Robert E. Lee.
In terms of strategy, you mean?
Strategically. He took a war that should have been over in a few days, and it was, years of hell, a vicious war. And so here I am standing there, and again, I had never really done this before. I ran a number of months before I won. I probably, I guess if you figured max it out, it would be a year, something like that. So I had never run for office. And I did well. I mean, I went into debates. We had 18 people, including me, and then slowly but surely they started to disappear. We had debates, good debates.
Everyone's aware of all this stuff. What I want to get to is, what was the experience once you got inside?
It was just
what did you think it was going to be like in terms of, your ability to govern?
Yeah.
This is your first experience governing anything. You've never been a governor. You've never been a mayor.
Private sector. Yeah.
But now all of a sudden, you're inside the White House.
The biggest thing was just that first moment of being in this hallowed, it was really a hallowed place to me. It was surreal. It was beyond. To me, it was the experience. It was a surreal experience. And then, with time, that wears off. With time, it becomes a place where you stay. And I was doing a lot of. I had two things that I really focused on: governing the country and survival. Because from the moment I won, before I got to office, all of a sudden, they came down. Nobody has ever been treated that way. And you see that. You see where in the Washington Post very early on they said, well, now the impeachment stuff starts. And it did. It literally started from the beginning. So I had survival and run the nation. I had a combination. Most people don't have the survival. They get in.
What did you expect, though, in terms of, once you got inside, you had to appoint all these people?
Yeah.
How many appointments did you have to make?
Well, you have actually 10,000 appointments. Now, they're different. You have big ones, and then they appoint 100 people and 200 people. But the president really is involved with approximately 10,000 appointments. So you'll appoint a Secretary of State, and he or she will appoint a lot of people. So it's a lot. But in terms of major ones, you probably have 100, but they're big ones. Treasury, State, military.
And how did you know who to appoint?
Well, I didn't.
You didn't?
You have to understand.
So
I was there 17 times in Washington. And I never stayed over. According to the press, which I think is probably right, over the years, I was only there 17 times. I never stayed over. So now I'm sitting there, I'm saying, this place is gorgeous, but, I don't know anybody. It's like you go to certain areas, and other areas, they may be great. Washington was great. Washington's not so great right now. They're gonna fix it. They're gonna make it better. It's a very dangerous place, very badly maintained place. We're gonna make it great. We're going to make it better. We're going to bring it back. But I wasn't a Washington guy. I was a New Yorker. I was a New York builder, and I built buildings in New York, and I knew that whole world, but I didn't know the Washington world too well. And all of a sudden, you're supposed to be appointing top people. So,
what did you think it was going to be like? Versus, did you have any ideas of what it was going to be like, and what was different?
Well, I was always involved in politics, but usually from the standpoint of a donor. I was a donor. I was a big donor. I gave money to politicians. I enjoyed politics.
Mostly Democrats, right?
Both, really, pretty much both. I had actually pictures of Ronald Reagan when I was very young.
You were a Democrat until what year?
I was a Democrat. I could get you the exact, but the early 90s. The early 90s. I switched over eventually. Actually, they had a reform party. I was thinking about doing that for a little while, but then fortunately I didn't because it's very hard. It's a two-party system. And anytime you hear third party, I know you like RFK Jr., and so do I. He's a fantastic guy.
I do, but I thought that being an independent was nonsense.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work because even if you do great, you're not going to get Congress. In other words, you need now to say, okay, now I'll get half of Congress that's never going to vote for you. So even if you got there, which is very hard, and and I know how you feel about Bobby, and I feel the same way, and he's now with us. But it doesn't. It's real. It's pure and simple. It's a two-party system.
Right.
And somebody, I won't mention his name, but somebody spent $250 million trying to get the nomination as a Reform Party candidate or whatever, and they got just nowhere. You get eaten. You just get eaten. The system eats you alive.
Right.
So it was really somebody that not only was new to Washington, but was new to politics. So in the office of the presidency, over the years, all those presidents, you've had 92% were politicians and 8% were generals. General Eisenhower, General Washington, right? General George Washington, you had generals. So it's 8% no admirals, 8% generals, and 92% politicians. Sure, they're politicians and they go on. So they never had a business guy, or they never had a guy that wasn't elected to an office. They were all like Ronald Reagan usually. He was a movie actor, and then but he became the governor of California for I think 2 terms, and then he ran. So you'd never had a thing like this. But I, in terms of me, and sometimes I'd use it as an excuse. And I don't like having excuses, actually, but I'd use it as an excuse. I had to rely on people that I respected or liked, but that I didn't know that well because I didn't know them that well. Some of those people I campaigned against because, when you have 18 people, we had mostly politicians running in the election, running in the primaries. And they got knocked out one by one, but I got to like some of them. Some of them I didn't like at all. I don't like them now. And I'd rely on them, and I'd rely on other people. So all of a sudden, he would come in, I'd like to recommend so-and-so to be Secretary of State, and I'd have 3, 4 people recommend. One thing I can tell you, everybody wants the position.
Of course.
No, but sometimes I'll hear, a lot of people don't want to work with Trump because Trump is tough to work with, etc. Everybody wants to be any one of these positions. They die for it.
Of course.
Now, they don't want to be known. I mean, there's a particular guy in New York, primarily. Very big, very successful, very strong, very political, although he's not a politician. He'd give anything to be Secretary of State, but if they ask him, no, I don't think I would do it. But in the meantime, begging for it, okay, begging.
I believe you.
Everybody wants it.
But what
by the way, no matter what you do, but it's very dangerous to pick somebody outside of a politician because a politician's been basically vetted for years.
Right.
You pick a business guy, and they've never been vetted at all, and they're, the head of a big company or something, but they've never been vetted. You know nothing about his personal life. You know nothing about where he's been. When you put him in, it's a little bit dangerous because all of a sudden they get checked up and you hear things that you're saying, wow, this is not going to work out too well. So it's very dangerous. Picking people that are outside of politics is somewhat dangerous.
So you're kind of stuck in a position where you have to pick established people. And then the problem with established people is established people are already indoctrinated into the system.
And they're stiffs in many cases.
Stiffs.
They're survivors. I find that,
What do you mean by stiffs? When you say stiffs?
A stiff, they don't have nothing. They have nothing. Or they're smart and survive. One little thing. So there was a congressman years before I ran, and I was very close to him. And I needed a license on something, and he was very important in getting the license. But it was a little bit controversial, the license, this particular thing that was being licensed. But I was close to this guy and helped him and everything else. And I went to him and said, I'd like to have you help. And he said, let me take a look at it. I said, ooh, that's not too good, but I really hope you're going to help. And anyway, he tapped me along for a long period of time and ultimately didn't do it. And I said, you are a stiff. You could have done this thing so easy, etc. But it was controversial. He was in Congress for many years, like 28 years. And, there's a reason when somebody's there for 28 years, you got to be sort of smart.
Right.
You have
a
all
survivor.
the scandals. And I realized he was a survivor.
And so they never do anything controversial. They never take any chances or speak their opinion that's outside of the... Yeah.
And yet I don't disrespect him for it. So I actually respected the guy more in a certain way. I said,
because he did survive.
You know what? He's been there like for 28 years, and he made it through. A lot of people don't make it through.
It's a good way for non-exceptional people to survive.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, it certainly is.
So you're in there. You have 10,000 appointments you have to make. Like, So you're getting advice from people, and at what point in time, did you have a moment in time where you realized like these are bad choices? Like some of these people I shouldn't have had in there.
Oh yeah, I think so. The one question that you'll ask me, that I think you'll ask me, that people seem to ask, and I always come up with the same answer. The one mistake, because I had a lot of success, great economy, great everything. Everything was great. The military, we rebuilt it, biggest tax cuts in history. All this stuff. We had a great presidency. 3 Supreme Court justices. Most people get none. You know, you pick them young. This way they're there for 50 years, right? So, you know, even if a president is there for 8 years, oftentimes they never have a chance. I had 3. It was sort of the luck of the draw. But I will say that it always comes back to the same answer. The biggest mistake I made was I picked some people. I picked some great people, you know, but you don't think about that. I picked some people that I shouldn't have picked. I picked a few people that I shouldn't have picked. And
Neocons?
yeah, neocons, or bad people, or disloyal people, or
People that were just
people
bad.
that were into
Yes,
people
you got
that.
bad advice.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're reading about him a little bit today. A guy like Kelly, who's a bully, but a weak person. You know more about bullies than anybody probably around, because you deal in a certain sport where the bullies are exposed very quickly.
Yeah.
But, you know, he's bad. Bolton was an idiot, but he was great for me because I'd go in with a guy like a John Bolton. You know John Bolton. A friend of mine called me up. I was picking Bolton. He's a very smart guy. His name's Phil Ruffin. He's a very rich guy from Las Vegas. He's a great card player. He doesn't play cards, but he's a great player. You know, he's just a natural poker sense, right? Good old poker sense. And Phil Ruffin is a very, very wise kind of a guy, and one of the richest people around, and has had great success and understands people. So it was in that I was picking Bolton. I picked Bolton. He called up and said, "Don't pick him. He's a bad guy." Now, he wasn't in politics at all. He's in various businesses. He said, "He's a bad guy. It always works out bad with that guy." And I said, "Oh, man, I wish you told me this 2 weeks ago. I already hired him. You know, he's here." And he was right, but he was good in a certain way. He's a nut job. And every time I had to deal with the country, when they saw this black job standing behind me, they said, "Oh, Trump's going to go to war with us." He was with Bush when they went stupidly into the Middle East. They should have never done it. I used to say it as a civilian. So I always got more publicity than other people. And it wasn't like I was trying. In fact, I don't know exactly why. Maybe you can tell me why.
Oh, I could definitely tell you. You said a lot of wild shit.
Maybe.
You said a lot of wild shit, and then CNN, in all their brilliance, by highlighting your wild shit, made you much more popular. And they boosted you in the polls because people were tired of someone talking in this bullshit, pre-prepared politician lingo. And even if they didn't agree with you, they at least knew whoever that guy is, that's him. That's really him. When you see certain people talk, certain people in the public eye, you don't know who they are. You have no idea who they are. It's very difficult to know. And you see them in conversations. They have these pre-planned answers. They say everything. It's very rehearsed. You never get to the meat of it. One of the beautiful things about you is that you freeball. Like, you get out and you do these huge events, and you're just talking, and you're making. We've highlighted you on the show many times when you did this Biden impression where he's walking around, he doesn't know what he's doing. It's funny. It's stand-up. It's funny stuff. But it's like and you were making fun of Elon one time. You were doing an Elon impression. It's great. You have like comedic instincts. Like when you said to Hillary, "You'd be in jail." Like, that's great timing. But it's like that kind of stuff was unheard of as a politician. Like, no one had done that. And I think...
You know, it's funny. You need at least the attitude of a comedian when you're doing this business. This is a very dangerous business, first of all. It's a very tough business.
It's the most dangerous business.
Yes, well, for a job?
Yes. I mean, other than going to war and being a firefighter or being a cop, it's the most dangerous business.
It's the most dangerous. Being president is the most dangerous.
Especially you. I mean,
much more
you
so.
haven't even got to the election. There's been 2 assassination attempts. And brush those out of the news like it was nothing.
Yeah, they'd rather not talk about them.
Imagine if there was assassination attempts on Biden, how hard people would be attacking the right, how they would be trying to get guns taken away from people, they would try to ramp up gun laws, they would try to figure out some way to blame you. If there was attacks on, if Biden got shot in here, we would have never heard the end of it.
But I think he's in good shape because it's only consequential presidents. If you take a look at what's happened, look, I'm for having countries pay us billions and billions and trillions even dollars. I took in hundreds of billions of dollars from China. Nobody took in 10 cents, not one other president. I do things that make it, that don't necessarily make me so popular. I just do what's right. And when you do that, you're more, look at Iran. We would have never had the attack on Israel at all. Iran was broke. I told China, if you buy, you can't do business in the United States under any circumstance. We're going to go cold turkey with China. Some people think that would have been a good idea anyway. But if you buy any oil, 1 barrel of oil from them, you're not doing business. And I said that to many countries. Iran was broke. They had no money for Hezbollah. They had no money for Hamas. They had no money. But I make myself, I understand what I'm doing. You make yourself a target, and it's a very dangerous business. But if you just look at statistically, so I said, I don't know if it's right, but 1/10% for a race car driver. Yeah, it's a pretty dangerous business, right?
Yeah.
1/10% for a bull rider. I tell you, to me, these guys that ride the bulls is worse than UFC. It's worse.
Yeah.
These guys, you see these big monster bulls, and you see it in slow motion where the foot is like, an inch away from the head. If it hits him, the guy's gone. But they die. They die.
So 1/10% die. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, 1/10% die.
Right.
And they certainly get hurt badly. Really, they can't walk after a certain period of time. But with the president, if you look at
the amount of assassination attempts.
And attempts, too.
Yeah.
And attempts. No, it's a very dangerous position. I never thought of that, by the way, when I did it. You don't tend to think.
Did you just assume because people loved you on The Apprentice, they were going to love you as a president?
It would be so easy.
It probably would have been if the media didn't attack you the way they did. If they didn't conflate you with Hitler. Even today, Kamala was talking about you and Hitler. They're going to take what you said about Robert E. Lee. Oh, Donald Trump wishes the South won. Yeah,
he loves Robert E. Lee.
They love to take things out of context and distort things.
But they don't even have to take them out. They make them up entirely. But it's interesting when you mentioned I was very popular, and all those people loved me. Some of these women, they're so stupid, and the joy. She would, every time she'd see me, like I'd be in the theater or something, and she'd, you have to be on the show again. Come on, let's go. She
loved you.
To love me.
That episode where people should watch that episode just to see what we're talking about. Like I said, we don't want to get a copyright strike, so we're not going to put it up. But if you watch the episode, it's bananas. It's like an alternative universe, and it's only
but Whoopi
9 years ago.
Whoopi loved
you. Gives you a hug and a kiss.
And how about that other one, the new one on there, the one from my administration? She writes me a letter. You're the greatest president. She leaves. She worked as an assistant press secretary. I hardly knew her. But she leaves and she writes me this gorgeous letter. What's her name? She was, I don't even know. She was in the administration. She's on now currently. Sits on the far right-hand side, whatever the hell her name is. And she writes a letter, the most beautiful letter. She's quoted in the paper. He was the greatest president, blah, blah, blah. Then all of a sudden she goes to the View. She started hitting the hell out of me. Because they won't hire her unless. I've had many people go on CNN and they called and said, I don't know what to do. They want to pay me a lot, but I have to be negative on you. I said, be negative. That's okay. There are guys on like CNN. They won't hire them. Sean Duffy is a congressman, and he retired. He got a good job with CNN, but he was only positive about Trump. So they kept him, but they would never put him on. I respect what he did. He could have gone, negative. I tell people, go negative. Let my friends make the money.
Well,
it's just so crooked. The press is so crooked.
It's crooked, but it's also they're diminishing themselves. They're killing all their credibility, and it's opening up the credibility to new media. It's opening up the credibility to independent media. All these.
The worst I've ever seen, though, and I've seen the worst. I've been a part of it. I've seen the worst. Kamala goes on 60 Minutes, gave an answer that a child wouldn't give. It was so bad. In 60 Minutes, took the answer out. They took the whole, and they put another answer in.
They edited it deceptively.
Which didn't make sense either, but it was better. They took the, well, it wasn't editing. It was fraud. This was not editing. You know, editing is where I'll give an answer and they'll take a couple of words and change it, or they might even take a sentence or two off, which is very bad. But that's sort of bad. You know, I give an answer which was a very good answer. I always talk about, you know, I like to give long the weave. You know, I like to
you like to weave things in.
But when you do the weaves, and you have to be very smart to do it. When you do the weave, look at this, just in this one thing, we're talking about little pieces all over here, but it always ends up,
home.
No, it comes back home for the right people. For the wrong people, it doesn't come back home and they end up in the wilderness, right? But they can take my answer, and you know, they may take a little piece of it out or something. And they use the term, yes, we want to save time. Well, it's not, but I've never heard. I think it's the biggest scandal in broadcast history, what happened to CBS. So you have CBS 60 Minutes. That's a news program. It's not an entertainment program. It's under their news. It's the head of their news thing. She gives an answer that shows that she's essentially incompetent. And they took the answer. Could you imagine them doing that?
We can show it if you want people to see it. Can we show it? No?
Sure.
We'll get in trouble. We'll get copyright strike. Okay.
Listen,
anyone can find it, but it's drastic. But what was interesting was the other full version was available initially. It was like a preview.
Somebody made a big mistake.
Somebody put that preview out there.
Some kid put the preview out.
Exactly.
And then the bosses did this or that. And then all of a sudden they said, we got a problem.
Exactly. And then
they got caught by mistake.
Well,
but don't you think that's a bit, to me, and don't forget, this is election interference and fraud. And it's 60 Minutes. It's their news division. So it's
a big deal.
They give those licenses out for free. They should pay a fortune. They're worth a fortune. They give them out for free because they're using the public airwaves. With cable, you don't have that. Cable's different. But, you know, it's just a different deal. But with the networks, they give those licenses. They're worth billions of dollars. They give them out, but you have to be honest. That was bad. I think that David Muir and that woman that was aside, I never even heard of her, but they kept interrupting me. It was like, I said, how many people am I debating here? I got this one and I got you two. But he went after me 11 different times. You know, it's interesting. I always thought he was a nice guy, but he's just like the rest of them, you know?
Well, that's his job, unfortunately, and I'm sure
but not when
what they
wrong.
want. You're right. Well, the problem was they fact-checked you and they didn't fact-check her. And
Not
one of the
at
most
all.
egregious examples of that was when she said that there are no troops right now deployed in war zones. There's a very famous viral video that went online of troops in a war zone saying, well, what the fuck are we doing? Because there's thousands of them. Dan Crenshaw, the congressman, posted on his Instagram all of the various examples of troops that are deployed, thousands and thousands of troops that are currently deployed.
Stupidly deployed.
But the point is, if this is going to be an actual real debate and not a propaganda exercise, if it's going to be a real debate, you have to fact check everybody.
So
Like if someone says maybe she thought there was no, which is also a problem. So it's one of two things. It's either it was not true, it was a lie on purpose, which is terrible, or it was the opposite. It was ignorance, which is also terrible.
Well, Joe, when I said crime is soaring, you said, no, crime has gone down. I said, where did you hear that one? Crime has gone down. I mean, I'm debating with this guy, but I've had that.
Well, there was amended FBI statistics that came out after that showed that crime had gone up substantially.
And by the way, the statistics were a fraud because when they put out the statistics, they didn't include some of the worst places. They didn't include some of the worst cities, some of the most deadly places. But when the real numbers came out, I turned out to be right. But I haven't.
You turned out to be right, but then there's another problem. Unreported crime is way up. Because people have lost, look, the morale that the police department has in a lot of these cities where they've done this defund the police bullshit. The morale of these poor cops, it's fucking horrible. It's the dumbest idea of all time. But what they've done is they've made these cops feel terrible, like good cops. I think cops are just like everybody else. Most of them are great. It's like everybody else. But if you run into one carpenter and he does a shitty job at your house, you say, carpenters fucking suck. But they don't suck. Most of them are great. And that's the key thing with cops. But the point is, like, they did all of these things in this very foolish way.
Right.
And these cops are suffering the consequences of it. And so subsequently what happens is a lot of crime is unreported. A lot of crime, like you call the cops, they're too busy, they can't even get to you. Oh, your house got broken into? Sorry. You know, it doesn't even make a report. There's a lot of people that they just give up.
It's so sad what's happened. And I'll tell you what, I go to police funerals, and we went to one in Long Island. I visited the family in Long Island. Very big deal. It's so dangerous. People don't realize. The car, dark windows, pull over. He's a gentleman. Please pull over. Door opens. Guy comes out firing. Even if they were allowed to pull out their gun, which they're not, they can't pull
Do it in
out.
time. Yeah.
They still wouldn't have time.
It's every cop's
They opened the door, and he was killed, and his partner was hurt. He was killed. And I mean, you don't even have an eighth of a second to think. And it is such a dangerous job. That in particular, think of it, you go up to a car, you don't know who's sitting there with a gun, and if they have a gun, you really don't have a chance. You're not allowed to have your gun out, by the way. They have very strict rules. So, number one, but even if you could have your gun out, the door opens and bullets start firing. And especially where they have the dark windows, where they have the darkened windows, it is such a dangerous profession. And it's very hard to get cops now, because they're not given any backup. And you're right. They have like an eighth of a second to make a decision that's going to change their life. If they make the wrong decision, they're going to end up on the front page of every newspaper in the country, and they're going to lose their house and their pension and their job, and their wife is going to be gone, and everything's going to be gone.
And here's another thing that people don't talk about. How many of them have PTSD? Probably most of them. These guys are seeing people shot all the time. You know, I've talked to a ton of cops about it, and a lot of cops commit suicide. A lot of cops are deeply depressed. A lot of
we have to give them back their dignity. We can't. We just have to give them back. You said it so good. You never hear anybody say that. You're never going to have it perfect. You're going to have a bad apple.
In everything, in every profession.
But every time there's a bad apple, that gets massive publicity, and it taints everybody else.
But it's also this very irresponsible thing where people say, defund the police, get rid of the police. Even Kamala Harris was a part of that. It's a very stupid way to look at it. What you should do is fund the police. You should have better training. You should have cops that feel more appreciated. You should have something that helps mitigate this PTSD that all of them suffer through.
She was a big part of defund the police. That was a big thing for her, defund the police. Always defund the police.
Well, it's a political idea,
but
right?
Anybody with that political thought, I don't think should be running for president, and I think people are getting wise to it. Yeah, we're doing pretty well. Now, I don't know. Maybe in a week from now, say, sorry about that, I was wrong, but we're leading everything. And I think we're going to have a very good election. But I tell people, because people are starting to get to know her. But she was defund the police. She was all these transgender operations. If you wanted a sex change and you were in detention and you demanded a sex change, they would give you a sex change.
Well, the wildest one is this idea of giving free sex change to illegal immigrants.
That's right. In detention.
That is the wildest thing. Is that the biggest problem you have?
Yeah.
You just walked here from Guatemala, you need to become a girl?
But she was in favor.
Yes.
So think of it. She changed. She changed 15 policies. In fact, I'm going to send her a MAGA cap.
She stole your idea about no tax for tips.
I came up with this idea that honestly nobody ever heard of. And now it took her 2 months, but you know what? All of a sudden,
It caught fire.
and she just put it into a little speech.
Yeah,
Well,
it became
but
popular.
I think we still have that issue. I think that issue is a good one for us. But no, we have a lot of good issues. We had the other day. Think of how simple some of these things are. We're trying to get cars built in the United States. Detroit has been really tough. It's been a disaster. They have a huge factory, a huge auto plant being built by China in Mexico, make cars, sell them in the United States, put everybody out of business. Right, here we go again. I said, if that plant is there, Mr. President, I will put 100 or 200% tariffs on every car. They'll be unsaleable in the United States. And they just announced they're not going to build the plant because they think I'm going to win. Think of it. They're not going to build the plant. This was the biggest plant in the world. It would have more than all of Michigan makes. So that's how big. This is what we're getting to. And I said, if that plan goes up, I want them to understand, if I win, I'm going to tax those cars at the rate of 100 or 200% apiece so that you won't be able to sell them in the United States. They just announced they're not going to build the plant.
Yeah, I read that.
I did a big favor for our country by doing that. And I'm not even there yet. To me, beautiful word. I've said this the last couple of weeks. In the dictionary today, is the word talent. It's more beautiful than love. It's more beautiful than anything. It's the most beautiful word. This country can become rich with the proper use of tariffs.
Did you just float out the idea of getting rid of income taxes and replacing it with tariffs?
Well, okay.
Were we serious about that?
Yeah, sure. Why not? Because our country was the richest relatively in the 1880s and 1890s. A president who was assassinated named McKinley. He was the tariff king. He spoke beautifully of tariffs. His language was very beautiful. We will not allow the enemy to come in and take our jobs and take our factories and take our workers and take our families unless they pay a big price. And the big price is tariffs. And he'd speak like that, and he was right. And then around the early 1900s, they switched over stupidly to an income tax. And you know why? Because countries were getting a lot of pressure in America. We don't want to pay tariffs. Please don't. You know, believe me, they control our politicians. If you look at the kind of numbers that these guys make, then and now. But we had a commission meeting in I think it was 1887. Think of this problem. We were so rich. We had so much money. We didn't know what to do, so they set up a blue ribbon commission on tariffs. And the sole purpose is what to do with all the money we had. We were so rich because we were taxing other people for coming in and taking our jobs. And China does it. That's what China did. If you want to open a factory and sell cars, if you build a factory here or have a factory, they don't take our cars. They wouldn't take our cars. But if you build a plant in China, you can do that. Elon did that. By the way, Elon is great. That guy is such a great guy. I think you're a fan of Elon. Him. He is from a different planet. He's the greatest guy. That rocket coming in.
Yeah.
I told the story once or twice. So you may have heard it because his speeches have been good. Did you see the one last night?
Yeah.
29,000 people. That was it.
Yeah.
And the one the night before was the same thing. We are rocking and rolling. But Elon, and I'm talking to this very important guy. I said, wait a minute. I'm looking at something. The television's unmuted, right? And I see this rocket. It's all brown from the heat. You know, it comes 10,000 degrees pouring down at thousands of miles an hour. And I see this, it's like a 20-story building.
And it catches.
And I say to this guy's an important guy, wait a minute, let me just put you down. Hold, I gotta see this. And I see this, and it's gonna crash. I said, it's gonna crash into the gantry. They call it a gantry. I said, oh man, that's gonna be a disaster because it's starting to get very close. And then all of a sudden you see the flames on the bottom, and then boom, and then you see the two arms grab it.
Crazy.
And I forgot the guy. I had him on the phone. I forgot. No, I said, the hell with it. No, I called Elon. I said, was that you? He said, that was me. And I said, who else can do that? He said, nobody. Russia can't do it. The United States, nobody can do it. You know, I set up Space Force. That was me. And that's the first time in 82 years that we opened another branch since the Air Force. And that's going to be one of our most important things. But think of what Elon does. And I did one other thing that I never heard of it. It's Starlink. I went down to North Carolina, Georgia, the different places, right up and followed it right down. And they had no communication. The poles were all knocked down, everything. And one of the guys in North Carolina said, could you do me a favor? Do you know Elon Musk is? He endorsed me. By the way, he gave me the nicest endorsement, too. The tough, he said, the country's going to fail. You should do the same thing, Joe. Because you cannot be voting for Kamala. Kamala, you're not a Kamala person. I know you. I've watched you. I know him better than he is. You know what? Without speaking to you, I think I know you maybe almost as well as your wife. I have watched you for so many years. You're not a Kamala person. You're a Khabib person, but you're not a Kamala person. No, nobody's going to know who Khabib is, but
they know
he was not bad, right? That guy.
He was phenomenal.
But that's your kind of
Your
person.
weave is getting wide. We're getting wide with
my
this
weave. But isn't it
I want to
much
bring it
better?
back to tariffs.
But wait one second before we finish with tariffs. So they said, could you get him? We need Starlink. And I got it for them so fast, saved so many lives. And I said, how was it? They said, better than the wires. You know, they couldn't get them. They were all gone. So
I used it recently in Utah in the mountains.
Did you find it good?
Oh, it's phenomenal. It's the size of a iPad. You just set it down on the ground, you get high-speed internet. It's incredible.
We're spending, just to show you, we're spending $1 trillion to get cables all over the country, right? Up to upstate areas where you have like 2 farms and they're spending millions of dollars to have
Well, talk about the
Elon can do it for
$42
nothing.
billion that was wasted on this internet access program that the United States. They didn't get anybody.
They haven't hooked up one person.
Not
yet.
one person. They spent $42 billion. They could have gotten Starlinks to everybody with that kind of money.
For almost nothing.
Yeah.
For a monthly charge.
And it would have been incredible. And
And he-
it's
and he
high-speed
wanted to-
internet everywhere you want to go.
And he wanted to do that.
And he wanted to do it.
How about this? They built the charger station in the Midwest. They built 8 of them because $9 billion. That's like a gas pump, right? They built 9 gas pumps, except electricity comes out. They spent $9 billion. 3 of them don't work. The whole thing. There's so much waste. I could sit here and tell you about things that there's so much waste, abuse, and fraud.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I think everybody's aware of that.
Let's go back to tariffs.
When you're talking about, one of the criticisms of your administration was with tax cuts and with tariffs, you increased the deficit. So, what was the strategy behind that? And did you think it was going to increase the deficit?
I got we were ready to rock. It was all, I had a bad system. We had horrible tax policy. I made it great with a much lower tax rate. So I took it from almost 40% down to 21%. Now I'm bringing it from 21 down to 15, but only if you make the product in the United States, which is good. People call me, they say, what a great idea. Nobody ever heard of that before. I don't care if they make the product in Japan. Why should I give up? So it's at 21. That, at 21, in the first year, we took in much more revenue than we did at almost 50. Think of that. It inspired. Now, we had other things, too. We were able to get people to bring back their money. You couldn't bring back your money. If you had money in Europe, like Apple. Apple had many billions of dollars outside. They couldn't bring it. There was no way to bring it back in. The bureaucracy, the documents, the whole thing. And also, the tax was too high. They wanted like half of it or something. Nobody's going to do that. So they leave their money in Japan and they spend their money there. That was part of what I did. The money came pouring back in. Apple took in hundreds of billions of dollars. They brought it back from overseas. They brought it in.
So how does the deficit increase because of that?
So what happened is that we were ready to rock and roll, and then we had to COVID, and we had to focus on that. And if we didn't give some businesses a hand, you would have had a depression like in 1929. But we were ready to start. We would have very shortly been paying off debt. We have $35 billion in debt. And I'll never forget it. It was talking about the standpoint of being in office. I'm in the Oval Office, and I had John McLaughlin and Fabrizio, the 2 very good pollsters, probably, I don't know, I would say the 2 best, who knows, but very good pollsters. And we're starting to think about running for a second term. And we had the greatest economy in history. Never has there been an economy like
And you attribute that to lowering taxes
a lot of it. 2 things. And also I cut regulations more than anybody else. And if I asked many of the businessmen, from the big companies, the guys running the big companies, I'd say, so if you had your choice, you've had it now for a long time, what's more important to you, the tax cuts, you paid less tax, or the regulation cuts? Every one of them said the regulation cuts meant more. Who would think that? Because you don't equate it to dollars, but it actually is more dollars. We had it going, and then we just had to focus on something else. But they were sitting there, these two pollsters were sitting there, and they said, sir, if George Washington came back and Abraham Lincoln was his VP, as opposed to Waltz, how bad is it, by the way? But if Abraham Lincoln was his VP, they couldn't beat you. You had it. And I'll never forget it. The following day, they said, something's happening in China, sir. Could we meet? I said, what's happening? People are dying, And it was all around the Wuhan lab, by the way. There are pictures with little lines and body bags all around the Wuhan lab. And I always said that from the beginning, Joe. It was, they tried to say, first they said it was France, and they blamed everybody.
Right.
But then they say it was bats from a cave 2,000 miles away. So we hit with that, and despite that, we had the best economy. And when I gave it over, the stock market was higher than it was pre-COVID. I mean, nobody could even believe it. But we saved, and we were helping businesses. They were dying.
So it's your belief that if you had a second term, given the policies in place, the way the economy was booming, that you would have been able to pay off a lot of the debt. And
if
that was
we
the
didn't have
strategy.
COVID, we would have been paying off debt, and we would have had. And don't forget, by growth, the word growth is actually more important because you could have the same debt, but if you double your growth, all of a sudden you're under leveraged. But still, we should pay off debt. If you viewed this $35 trillion right now, it's a lot. But if you look at the asset value, if you look at it really as an asset value, we have oil underground, we have water, we have mountains, the assets are so enormous. But regardless of that, we've got $35 trillion in debt, we should pay it off. And we would have started paying off debt and probably even given further tax reductions. I want to get it down to 15%. We're going to do more business. But when you get hit with a COVID, everything stops, and you have to keep these businesses alive. The businesses were dying. I mean, they were just dying. This whole place, this country was going to die.
Are there influences outside of environmental that keep people from wanting to drill for oil and frack and do those sort of things outside of the environmental concerns, which are legitimate, of course?
No,
but are there other influences that maybe over-accentuate or over-exaggerate these environmental effects? Are people being influenced in a way where they're trying to keep us from producing American oil?
Yeah. So the environmental is the biggest tool for stopping growth, the biggest tool. The other is regulation. And if you speak to Elon, he said the regulation now to send a rocket up to anywhere, even if you do everything, it's becoming impossible. But they used environmental in order to get people not to do anything. And sometimes I say, I look at some of I know the environmental stuff better because I had to build buildings in New York. I had to do environmental impact studies. And I would see some of these guys that I'd hire for a lot of money, environmentalists that would take you through the process. And they'd be up in Albany, that's the capital of New York, and they're up there trying to make it tougher for guys like me that were builders because they'd get paid more money. In other words, I had one guy, highly recommended. I was good at getting permits. I was one of the kings of. I was always very good, but the environmental stuff was always horrible. They could slow a project down 10 years, 15 years. I had a project in Louisiana, built a big LNG plant. It was for 14 years. It cost $18 billion. One of the biggest, like the Empire State Building, laying down on its side times 4. Massive on the coast, on the Gulf Coast. And they said, sir, they're going to give it up. I said, they shouldn't give it up. What's the problem? They can't get their environmental. They had environmental permits that would fill this whole room up to the ceiling. And they said there was one mistake on one little line. They wanted to do it all over. It's not going to happen. And I got them their permit instantly. And they built the plant. It's massive.
So when you're saying that, there's people that are making money by making it difficult.
Yeah.
Are you talking about lawyers?
No, I'm talking about environmental consultants and lawyers.
Environmental consultants profit off of dragging out the process.
Absolutely.
And
how
how
do
do
they
they
process
profit?
worse?
How do they profit?
And I'd probably do the same thing if I were them, to be honest with you.
As a
I want to be
businessman.
honest with you.
How do they do that? How do they make it?
They
how
go,
do they,
let's say New York, they go to Albany.
Okay.
And they convince people that if you have a certain type of plant on the ground that's this big, in theory valueless, that it's a rare plant, and you cannot even touch it. You can't go near it. You can't put a building on it. You can't do anything. Or there's a little puddle, and they call it a lake. And you have to go by the standards of the lake. I said, no, that's a puddle. Oh, you have no idea. Guys are filling little puddles. You have no idea what they do.
And so,
And they use it as a way to stop you.
they use it as a way to stop you, and also as a way to generate money. I'm
It's a weapon.
curious how are they generating money that way, though?
Well, they get fees.
They get fees.
Massive fees.
And
Pay these guys.
people rely on them as experts because they're the people that they go to when they have to run these studies in the first
But
place.
some of them are just bad guys, and they're trying to make it more and more difficult.
And they have a lot of power.
Yeah, I think they maybe had more. They didn't have as much with me because I would get through them. And I understood it. Look, I've done so many environmental impact studies. I did so much to build a building. To build a building in New York is very tough. You got to be you got to deal with. Think of it: financing, unions, all the municipal stuff, environmental. Of all of it, to me, the toughest thing was the environmental, because they could stop you cold with the environmental impact studies. And you hire a so-called expert who serves as the one guy who can get you through the morass. It's a morass. It's horrible. They use it as a weapon. They use it all over the country.
Right, but there are legitimate concerns about environmental
There
impact,
are,
correct?
there are,
Like, look about the BP oil spill. There's a lot of things that do happen that are environmentally devastating, and you want to mitigate that as much as possible.
Look, I had, during our 4 years, we had the cleanest air and the cleanest water. I do it differently. I say air and water. Remember this, it costs much more to do things environmentally clean. China doesn't do anything.
Right.
When Kerry goes to see President Xi of China, which he probably doesn't even get to see him, but they look at, oh yes, we will do, oh yes, we're going to do that. No more coal, no more coal. And then they approve 58 coal plants for the next, they build a coal plant a week. Okay?
They build a lot of coal plants.
But let me just tell you, so you are cleaning and scrubbing everything, and everything's got to, the air's got to be pure. But in 3.8 days, that stuff is floating over China, right over the top of us.
Right.
Same thing with the oceans. They dump their garbage into the Pacific Ocean. If you take a little cork and put it there, in about a week and a half, it'll be in front of Los Angeles. We're picking up their garbage. So nobody ever talks about that. But in a way, the bigger one is even the air. It's the currents. It's an amazing thing. It's been flowing that way for 1,000,000 years, or long before
We
long
share
before
air
we
with the
all
whole
did.
world. Yeah.
No. If
We
you're
get the
cleaning,
Sahara dust clouds over here.
absolutely.
We get dust clouds in Austin from the Sahara Desert.
But we get the China, they call it the China curse. We get the China curse. They're bad, and the air is dirty. When I went there, I had a great relationship with President Xi. We got along very well. And they treated me better than anybody has ever been treated. Same thing with Saudi Arabia, a number of them. But they laid it out. And I said, this air is good. Do you know they closed every factory 1 week before I got there from within 200 miles?
That's like what Gavin Newsom did when Xi Jinping came to San Francisco.
cleaned it up.
He cleaned it up. He got rid of all
Isn't
the
that
homeless
terrible
people.
in a way to think, he cleaned it up and then it became a pigsty.
Well, the
He
dumbest
is-
thing is that when your friends come by, when you have visitors, you clean up your house. Like, how about just keep your fucking house clean?
Can you imagine?
It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard anybody say ever as a governor as to excuse to why you finally cleaned up your homeless problem.
And the day he left,
Right back to
it
it.
went right back.
Yeah.
But in a way, that was a bad thing that he did, because he should.
Shouldn't be done.
What a disgrace that
Yeah.
was. What a disgrace.
Well, this is the thing that shows you how foolish a lot of these people that are running these cities think, and a lot of these people that are running these states think. It's foolish. Like you're insulting the intelligence of the people that live in that city that are impacted by these people just camping and needles and human feces. There's an app
Horrible.
that you can buy. There's an app that you can get, rather, that will show you where the human feces has been documented in San Francisco. It's a poo app. And it's just everywhere. Just bum crap everywhere.
But let me give you one that you may not know, which I think you know everything, actually, as a student of yours. But water, in Los Angeles, you can't get proper amounts of water.
Right.
And it's unbelievably expensive. And you might have a house in Beverly Hills, and they're actually thinking about rationing water. Can you believe it?
I can believe
And
it.
I was in the farm court country with some of the congressmen. We're driving up a highway, and I say, how come all this land is so barren. It's farmland, and it looked terrible. It was just brown and bad. I said, but there's always that little corner that's so green and beautiful. They said, we have no water. I said, do you have a drought? No, we don't have a drought. I said, why do you have no water? Because the water isn't allowed to flow down. It's got a natural flow from Canada all the way up north. Water, more water than they could ever use. And in order to protect a tiny little fish, the water up north gets routed into the Pacific Ocean. Millions and millions of gallons of water gets poured. You got to see this. We're driving up, and I had never seen it before. It's like Iowa. It's the most fertile land. Iowa's blessed with great land. Idaho for a potato, right?
Yeah.
But they're just, by the way, you know, some land is good for a potato, some land is good for corn. It's the craziest thing. I love the farmers. They're great. They're the greatest. And by the way, they're getting killed right now.
They are.
They're getting killed because of this stupid administration. But so I see this, and I said, you gotta be kidding. I said, really, you have water? And I looked at it. It's like a valve in your sink, except it's massive. The thing's 5 times taller than your ceiling.
Did you know the center of California was a giant lake?
They have so much water.
You ever see what it looks like before they rerouted it?
I never saw that.
The center of California, like, what is it, 200 years ago? How long ago did they do that, Jamie? The center of California had a fucking enormous lake in the middle of
So
California.
they dumped it into the Pacific.
Who knows what they did? But whatever foolishness that they did led to the situation that they're in now.
Think of those dry forests that burned down all over. You know, the head of Austria said,
Here it is, Tulare Lake, or Tachi Lake. It's a freshwater lake in the southern San Joaquin Valley, United States. Historically, Tulare Lake was one of the largest freshwater lakes west of the Mississippi. Show a photo of what it looked like back then.
it's a great system.
So that's what it looked like. Look at that image. Now go to the one on the third from the right. Yeah. That was an enormous lake in the middle of California. Imagine that.
That'd be much more valuable
How
property.
crazy is that? How crazy is that?
So
What
what
it
did
used
they
to look
do?
like, and human beings screwed that
No,
up.
they let it go into the Pacific, and then they...
I don't know what they did. What did they do? How did it go missing?
Yeah, they drained it.
1983. Oh my God. Oh, went dry a handful of times. Well, you know, lakes do go dry. That's a big one.
But think of
That's a
it,
big one to go
you
dry.
could have all of the water you need. All of that land would have more water. The whole thing would be like that little patch. And
Yeah.
Literally, I'd say I was with Devin Nunes as a congressman and other congressmen. When we were growing up, I was visiting that because they asked me to go up and visit their territory. But I kept saying, look at this land, it's beautiful, but it's so dry. And I thought they were going through like a desert, like a drought. They said, no, we have water, but it gets rid. So I looked into it.
What's the
And I
fish?
got it done. I could have water for all of that land, water for your forests. You know, your forests are dry as a bone.
Yeah.
Okay?
Dangerous.
That water could be routed. You know, you can have everything. Oh, not only dangerous, billions of dollars a year they spend on forest fires. And you know, there's a case with the environment. They're not allowed to rake their forests because you're not allowed to touch it. When a tree falls down, after 18 months it becomes very dry. It's like, you know, like real firewood. It's bad. You know, a tree that's up, these are all things I learned the hard way, the easy way. But when a tree is up, it sucks water. It's wet. I went to they had a couple of horrible forest fires in California, and I said, you know, you had a lot of trees standing. Yes, they were healthy trees, sir. I said, with this intense heat, that you could see they were charred a little bit on the bottom, but they were going to be all right because they're soaking wet because they suck up the water, right? But when they fall,
Right.
they're like, you know, it's like lighting a match.
Yeah.
And you got to be able to clean, they call it maintain your forest. So I
Yeah.
was with the head of Austria. He said, you know, it's a shame. I see all those forest fires in California, and all they have to do is clean their forest, meaning rake it up, get rid of the leaves, get rid of the leaves that are sitting there for 5 years, and
We'll
then,
certainly get rid of the dead fall.
and get rid of the trees that have fallen, and
Yeah.
that you know, or like so many things. This country. By the way,
Could you
I had it
rake the
all
whole
down.
forest? I don't think you could rake the whole forest.
you could-
I think you can get rid of the deadfall, but raking all
You
the
could
leaves.
certainly get rid of the dead. Okay,
Yeah, I think that's the real
You
issue,
know,
the deadfall.
environmentally, they don't want to do that. They don't. They said, you know, it's got to be nature and all this stuff. But in the meantime, this is exactly.
Yeah.
Right. But you could have It was the Department of Commerce that needed the approvals, but Gavin Newsom had to sign them. I got it all done. Nobody could believe it. It was all done. I said, I got it. You got so much water. All you have to do is sign. And that guy didn't want to sign.
Did he not want to sign because that would be a political victory for you?
I think, no, he didn't. No, I don't think so. He used to say he's a great president and we got along. We did. We actually got along at that point. But I think somebody said you just can't continue to call him a great president. You know, they do say that. But we had it all done. He didn't sign, and then we got on to other things. And I every time I go to California, I say, you have so much water. They don't know it. I'm telling you, people living in Beverly Hills, they turn off the water. Same thing with the electric. They want to go to all electric cars, but they have brownouts every week. You know?
Well, right after they made the announcement that as of 2035, you're not going to be able to buy an internal combustion engine in California, like within a month, they had some announcement asking people to not charge their Teslas. The grid couldn't handle it. Well, how are you going to
I will terminate the mandate immediately.
Thank you.
That will be done, I would say, in my first day, maybe 2 days, because, you know.
Let me ask you about nuclear. One of the things that when I've talked to people that have a real understanding of nuclear power, what their position is, it's probably the cleanest, safest form of electricity that we can generate. And that the fears of nuclear power are really about a few disasters, the Fukushima, 3 Mile Island. These are old systems, and they're much more capable now, and they're capable of making even better systems. But it's a difficult political issue because you think nuclear power, you think Chernobyl. That's what everybody does. They have this connection in their head, the potential
or
disaster.
Fukushima, where you're not supposed to enter the land for 3,000 years.
Yeah, I think it's worse than that. I think that area is like going to be radioactive for probably longer than you could imagine. But the point is, they're better at it now. Right. And if they can do it now, and you can generate power in a way that you don't have to worry about this. One of the most ridiculous things is electric cars being powered by coal-fired plants. It's a ridiculous thing.
So what's happening?
Yeah, it is what's happening. And people want to think they're being green, you know, but it's...
Well, if you look at the way the batteries work. But here's the other thing. Right. We don't have... Well, we do, actually. It's being held. You know, we have certain areas where we have great raw earth material, and we're not allowed to use it because of the environment. And we have areas in California that have incredible raw earth, and they're not allowing, and I'm going to open it up. I'm going to let them use it.
But how do you do that?
China.
How do you do that and protect the environment?
Because the environment's going to be protected. You can do it. You can make a lake out of it. Okay, we'll put back a lake. I mean, something nice about lakes. You can do things magnificently.
You just have to do it carefully and responsibly.
Absolutely, you have to do it carefully. But the problem, you know, China has all of those areas, most of those areas. And yet, when they say go electric with the cars, China's going to be the one that gives us the cars. All of those guys in Detroit are going to be out of business. You're going to make your electric cars over there. We have a thing called gasoline, and we have more oil and gas under our feet than any other nation. You know, I had, in Alaska, there's a farm, it's called Anwar. I got it approved. Reagan couldn't get it. Nobody could get it. I got it all done. It was amazing. They were getting ready to start drilling. The equivalent, they think, of Saudi Arabia, one of the biggest finds in the world. It was all set to go. And Biden comes in, one of his first orders were, we're not going to use it. It would have been so good for them. We could have supplied all of Asia with oil and gas.
What was the negative?
And you talk about money.
Right.
The negative was politically they didn't think it was good for them.
That's all. So you don't think that it's environmentally dangerous?
Taking it from way down deep in the earth, environmentally would have been fine.
So it can be done responsibly.
Absolutely. Oh, otherwise,
let's protect the environment.
Well, I think windmills. So they talk about windmills. I think windmills are really destructive. When you talk about the environment, they kill the birds. You want to see a bird cemetery? Go under a windmill someday that hasn't been cleaned out with all the bird carcasses. It's like massive amounts of
Well, they're also a massive eyesore. I went to a ranch in South Texas and we had to drive past this enormous windmill farm. It's gross. It's dystopian. You're looking in the left and the right. All you see is these big spinning machines that aren't even that effective at generating electricity.
Correct. Most expensive form of electricity is a windmill. and then they start to rust and rot.
And you have to
And then they
replace
get
them.
abandoned by the people that built them.
Well, you have to get rid of all that material too. When you replace those blades, now you have a problem because you have
Can't
to
bury 'em.
dispose. Right, you have to dispose these enormous windmills. And how
By
do
the
you
way, they
dispose
say
them?
you can't bury them. So I even question that, but I'm not going to get into it. But they say you can't bury the blades. So you have the blades, and you can't bury the blades. You can bury the blades. It's not going to matter. You can bury them. You'll find areas you can bury. But they come up. This is what I mean. They come up with this. But the environmentalists believe these windmills are. You know what happens to them? After 5 years, they start to rot. After 10 years, you have to replace them. Did you ever look at certain parts of California where they have heavy windmills and they've been abandoned? And they're all different manufacturers and all different companies. And they it is the ugliest thing. It looks like a graveyard almost, a graveyard of windmills.
It's pollution.
It's so bad.
It's
And in
no
the
more,
oceans.
It's no different than leaving garbage on the ground.
How about in New Jersey, off the coast of New Jersey, they want to build, but people are going crazy not to build them. But where you have them, the whales are washing up on shore.
Right.
So in 50 years, they had one whale come ashore. Now they had like 18 come in the last year.
What is happening with the whales? I've read about this.
Well, they say that the wind drives them crazy. You know, it's a vibration because you have those,
Right.
those things are 50-story buildings.
Right, and they're super sensitive to vibrations,
They have those,
sounds.
the wind is rushing, the things are blowing, it's a vibration, and it makes noise. You know what it is? I want to be a whale psychiatrist. It drives the whales freaking crazy. And something happens with them. But for whatever reason, they're getting washed up on shore, and, and yet the
Conveniently
environmentalists...
ignored by the
Yeah, but the
environmental people.
environmentalists, they don't talk about it.
Right.
I think there's nothing like it. I see it in Scotland. I see it all over the world. You have this beautiful valley. It's been there for, in civilization, thousands of years, but millions of years. And all of a sudden, you have these ugly windmills.
Would your
And the
plan to be
environment-
replace that with nuclear? What would you do?
Well, nuclear is better. I mean, I think there's a little danger in nuclear, but, we had some really bad nuclear. They did one in Alabama. They did one in, I think, South Carolina. They do them wrong. They do these massive things. Then the environmentalists get in. I don't want to go into a long story. It's too long for the show. This show is too valuable to talk about concrete. But they have hardened concrete. It's number 12 concrete. It's harder than steel. It's incredible. They put up a wall and the inspector comes along and goes, no, you're a quarter of an inch or the wall might be 8 feet wide. You're a quarter of an inch too short. I'm sorry, you got to rip down the wall. Because it's got to be poured contiguously, right? You're 1/4 of an inch. I'm sorry, rip down. You can't rip down this stuff. You can't put a hammer through it. You can't. It's incredible. Concrete technology is unbelievable. What's happened? You think of concrete.
So you think that's an example of overregulation?
Yeah, no.
Pointless
Well, you have an
overregulation.
inspector that comes along and he says, take down a $25 zillion wall. These things ended up costing $25 billion. And one of them never got opened. But here's the story. So France does it. France is largely nuclear. And they build small, little, compact plants. And if they need more, they build the same thing and they hook it up. And they hook it up because they get too big and too complex and too expensive. And it is very clean. They say it's absolutely... my uncle, I had a great uncle who was a great genius, just like other members of my family. But he was a professor at MIT. I think 41 years. He was the longest. When I was in the White House, they had a MIT, Princeton, and Harvard came to meet me. And the MIT person said, I have a book on your uncle, Dr. John Trump. He was our longest-serving professor. He was a great genius, sir. Do you know how? And he had, he knew everything. Nuclear, from math to chemistry to nuclear, he knew it. And he said, someday it's going to be the way to go, but the problem is it's so dangerous in terms of war. He said, Donald, someday, this was a long time ago, Uncle John, Dr. John Trump, he said, someday you'll have a little satchel at your side, and you'll go into a building and you'll be able to blow up New York City. They said, Uncle John, that'll never happen. He's right. He's right.
Well, that was
the
part
power
of the
is so
problem
crazy.
with giving nuclear power to other countries, right? Like, that was the problem that happened with India and Pakistan. They got nuclear power, and then they were able to weaponize it.
The biggest problem in the world today is not global warming. It's nuclear warming. And we have idiots that are negotiating for us. We have a guy that doesn't make it past 4 o'clock, and it's not because of age. You know, I know so many guys in their late 80s, and they're better than me. I said to one guy the other day, I think you're smarter than you were 25 years ago. I've known him a long time. He's 89 years old. He's sharp. I mean, he's good. Biden gives people a bad name because that's not an age. That's not an age. I think they say it because I'm 3 or 4 years younger. You know, I think that's why they say it. They say his age. It's not his age.
He's had
got a problem.
2 major brain
Operations.
surgeries.
Yeah. He did. Those are not good operations.
And did you see what he did today? He went running towards the camera and made some apology to Native Americans. And that he said that's why he's headed out west. Like, he's off the reservation, so to speak, for lack of a better term.
You know, it's interesting because during the debate, I was looking over. I'm saying, this is strange. It's just sort of like strange things are happening.
Yeah.
But
well, he couldn't keep it together. But do you think they knew he couldn't keep it together?
I think
do you
so.
think that they wanted that? Is that why, like, historically, that debate was earlier than they've been in the past, right?
I think they wanted to. Well, there's a lot of things. A lot of people said, do the debate now and we'll get him out.
Right.
I think that maybe could be.
Well, that is what happened. So it's
I think they also said,
intuitive.
do the debate now and get it over with. I don't think anybody thought he was going to get out, really. I don't
Didn't
think
make any sense.
The debate got him out, but I think it's very unfair. Look, you have a bad debate, his numbers went down, but I think she's not doing very well right now, and I think she looks.
Well, I want to get to that too, because it's hard to know. Like, the whole poll thing is very bizarre for most people, because most people don't answer polls. So they read the polls and they're
Were
like,
you ever called from a poll?
If I did, I'd hang up.
I was never called by a poll.
If I did, I wouldn't answer. I'm busy.
You know how polls are? I'm going to get myself in trouble. So I really don't believe too much in it. So,
Well, 2016 taught a lot of people about the ineffective.
yeah, they were very ineffective.
Yeah.
I thought I was doing well. I'd go to a place and I'd have 30, 40,000 people. Hillary would go to have 500 people, and they tell me I'm going to lose. I said, why am I going to lose? I had 40,000 people. She had 200 people. But, you know, I have a theory. These pollsters, they charge you a lot of money, too. You know, they charge you $500,000 to do some stupid poll, and they interview like 251 people. I don't think they interview in many cases. I don't want to get myself in too much trouble.
think it's bullshit?
I think they sit there, they make a deal, they get $500,000, and they say, Trump's leading 51 to 49. They announce it, and everybody says, oh. You understand? I
Yeah.
I don't think they. I think in a lot. Look, I'm a very common sense person. I think that they probably don't always poll. Some of them probably never poll. What's the difference between 49 to 51 and 47 and a half?
Well, it's also a tiny percentage of the population. I don't think it's representative of the overall population. I just don't think
I don't
it
know
is.
of one person in my whole life that ever got called by a pollster.
Exactly. That's my point. So, here's my question.
But I shouldn't say that because I'm doing really well in the polls.
But I think that's
So this week I happen to believe in a verse. I only believe them if they're good. No, I like them this month. But no, I honestly believe that there's probably a lot of fraud. I had a poll, Washington Post, ABC, in the Hillary thing, won Wisconsin. They had me down 17 points the day before the election. I knew it was wrong because I had a rally of 29,000 people at a racetrack, and it was like 0 degrees, Wisconsin. And they had me down 17 points. In other words, you had no chance. And I won. And I called up my pollster. He's a good guy, good. And I believe he's legit. You know, some of them are, some of them aren't. I said, tell me, why did they have me down so much? I mean, nobody's going to believe them the next time. They said, they don't care. When you're down 17 points, people are going to stay home. They're not going to vote.
Right.
Because they're going to say, I love Trump, but I'm not going to waste my time. It's cold out. I said, but what if they make it 4 or 5? He said, at 4 or 5, they're going to go and vote. At 17, they're not going to go and vote.
So
Think of it, I was 7. This is the Washington Post, ABC poll. I was down 17 points in Wisconsin, and I won. It's crooked stuff.
There's a lot of crooked stuff, and I wanted to talk about that too, because one of the things that people talk about with you is the denial of the results. And I think J.D. Vance did a brilliant job the other day when he was being interviewed, and they asked him, did Trump lose the 2020 election? And he turned it around and said, was there legitimate election interference in suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop story on social media? And was that a concerted effort?
Well, they said it made 10-point difference, and I lost by one tenth of a point.
It is.
They say it was 22,000 votes, but look, it was much more than that, and I appreciate J.D. Vance saying that. And by the way, I think he was a great player. Do you like J.D. as a
I like him a lot. Yeah.
You're allowed to say that.
No, I do. I like him a lot.
I think he's great.
I think he's a brilliant guy, and I think his ability to talk like a normal human being. You did my friend Theo Vaughn's podcast,
Right.
and he just did it.
How did he do
He
with
did great. He just talks like a normal human being.
Is that why you called me?
No. I was.
He was a nice guy.
Once they shot you, I was like, you gotta come in here. It's all about timing. It's all about the timing.
Timing's
I think our timing's perfect.
I do.
What do we say?
Right over here.
Oh, it's a tiny little
See,
mark.
it zicked right there.
Yeah.